Hi everyone, my name is Sarah and welcome back to Everyday Consent. Our camera today is a little bit different because our normal fancy one ran out of batteries, so please excuse the slight changes today. But we're back with another really fun consent chat with my good friend Chelsea. So Chelsea, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Chelsea. I am not in any relationships right now, and I identify as gray asexual, which for those of you who don't know what that means, asexuality is a spectrum, like everything in this life. And asexual essentially means someone who isn't interested or doesn't have sex for whatever reason, whatever sex means to them, or whatever reason they don't do it. That is the general definition and label that some people choose. But on the, someone who is in the middle of that spectrum is gray asexual. And it's really fuzzy. And I honestly think that most people are a little bit asexual. Like, I've never met a person who's always down to do everything all the time. So I think that, but choosing that label really helps me actually navigate consent a little bit better, because it sort of helps people understand that I may not be as willing to do things as previous partners they've been with, and that consent really needs to happen on a more continual level. So.
Awesome, thanks. So let's just go ahead and jump in then. So what does consent mean to you?
I think consent is ongoing, like it needs to be happening all the time. I think that it is both verbal and nonverbal, preferably both at once. Like, words can mean one thing, but you should also watch for someone's nonverbal cues to make sure that they really mean what they say, or that that is an enthusiastic a yes as you want.
Sure.
I think that you can definitely, go beyond that definition with a partner you've been with for a while and have a good standard of communication with, but the default level of consent should be words and nonverbal cues. And I think that I'm actually a little bit concerned with, I love that consent is becoming more a part of our conversations, but I'm a little concerned with the definition that people have fallen back out of, like, no means no and yes means yes, because those are just words. And yes is way different than yeah. Like, those are two different things, and I think that, we really need to be looking for both the verbal and the nonverbal at the same time.
That makes a lot of sense. Cool. Do you have any creative ways that you figured out to ask for or give consent?
Not really. I think that, you can figure that out with your partner, but words are so important. And I think that I'm a little concerned with the hesitancy in, both our age range and our society to actually use our words when talking about sex and during sex. That could come from a whole variety of places, but I think that creative consent is probably not something you should do with someone if you're just sleeping with them for the first time, or if you're just starting to get to know each other. It's definitely it's a standard you establish after the sort of baseline of explicit, clear consent.
So you would say for new relationships, then definitely use your words as clearly as possible.
Use your words, yes. I mean, and you've already talked about this, about how you need to use a lot of words. There's no such thing as too many words, and if you are sleeping with someone and they think that words are ruining the mood, unless you've already had a talk about what else you could use, that is the time to back off. That's probably not going to go well in the end.
Have words and consent always come easily to you?
Not always. I wasn't raised in the most sex positive environment, and consent wasn't a word I heard until college. So as I was sort of discovering that I may be asexual and having this very mixed range of experiences, I had a lot of difficulty finding the right words and having a conversation with my partners. And to be honest, it would have been helpful if they had been there too, trying to have a conversation. I take as much responsibility for not using my words as I did, but there wasn't really a conversation, and so that took me a while to figure out what I actually wanted and how I actually defined myself and what I actually wanted to be doing in sexual relationships, because I was never sure if the lack of communication and the resulting bad sex was my fault. So it took me a while to figure out that I had just a different way of going about things than people.
So would you say that what made it easier for you to learn to use words was mostly just learning about yourself?
Learning about myself, learning that it was okay to say no to things that other people might, would be normal people might say yes to. That even when you're really comfortable with someone and attracted to them, that doesn't mean you have to have sex with them.
Sure.
And because, when you're not really raised in a area where that really explicit and ongoing consent is the norm, or portrayed as the norm, in high school, what you hear about sex is through or middle school, for those who went to middle school, you hear about sex through really convoluted channels, through the internet, through like lots of channels that aren't communicating that well. The consent is as necessary as it is. So it took me a while to figure out how to both establish standards of consent and deny it.
Yeah. So what messages about consent did you learn while you were growing up, and from what avenues?
I mean, you don't really hear, especially as a young woman, you don't really hear about consent being necessary. Like, there's definitely roles you're supposed to play in sexual relationships, and I think that it's all tied up with like really problematic gender norms in our society, that women are sort of supposed to be the silent receivers of sex, and men are supposed to be the active givers of sex. Like, that's sexual objectification in a nutshell. So I think that it feels really abnormal at first when you're young and starting to explore your sexuality to trying to be seeking consent, especially if you don't have a definition of what that is or have an idea of how necessary it is.
So you said that you sort of were learning about this in college or earlier than that?
I first heard the term consent when I came to college, and I went to a very liberal college, so I learned quite quickly what consent was and how to different standards of consent. I still think that even in this liberal college there was just an emphasis on yes and no, and I think that is such a low bar. We really need to be raising that bar today.
It's really just the most simple.
Yeah, it's the simplest, and then everybody can get on board with it. I think that
baby steps.
Yeah, it's a good start. It's a good start, but it's very much a baby step, and I'd like to see us take bigger steps towards, particularly in college environments where consent can be such a huge problem. And I think that we really need to be taking bigger steps towards a more active, engaged definition of consent that reaches beyond one yes is enough. Everything after that is a go.
Yeah, exactly. Can you think of some of your favorite moments of consent that you've had in your life?
Yeah, all of them involved words.
Words are good.
I'm big on words. Someone once asked me, well, they didn't ask me, they just said, I want to kiss you. It was asking an open-ended question, which is really nice. If someone says, can I kiss you? That's good. It's definitely a great thing to ask. It's very hot. But then you kind of are left in a yes or no situation, and I think that it hands a little bit more agency to you to ask an open-ended question of here's what I want to do. What do you want to do?
So that they're making just a statement of their desires rather than just giving you something to act on.
Yeah, because that's a kind of limited range of options.
Sure.
I mean, I could have been I don't want to kiss you, I want to climb a tree with you. And that would have been a perfectly reasonable way to respond to that desire. I guess that's the benefit of being abnormal is that you get to break out of this abnormal. You get to break out of the scripts a little bit more, and you get to make up your own rules. You get to decide what consent looks like for you, and I think communication can be a lot easier because there isn't that same script to fall back to. So you gotta figure out how this is gonna go down.